Previously on the business.
Now we're getting back into our normalness for today, and that is, of course, we're talking social and digital media, and we're joined by the amazing Mel Attree. This is the first time I'm doing a Skype call, so forgive me if I get this wrong.
Can you see us, Mel?
Hello, Priya. Hello.
All right, so Mel is our resident social media and digital media guru, and we decided we'll talk about something that has literally been taking the social media sphere by storm over the last couple of weeks, and that is, of course, Woolworths.
Yes. So, unless you've been living under a rock, you would have noticed that Woolworths has had a lot of social media buzz this past 6 days, which has spilled over into traditional media. So I don't blame you if you've only read about it there. Kriya, I wanted to talk today about the fact to do with crisis communications and social media, because I think it's something that's quite topical for a lot of brands. Unfortunately, Woolies is a brand that gets hit quite often, and it's purely because people seem to either love or, they do love the brand, therefore they feel some sort of sense of urgency or sense of purpose when something goes wrong. So let's just kind of recap very quickly in terms of what happened over the last 6 days. So on Friday afternoon, there was an independent designer who posted a blog post, and she insinuated that Woolworths had stolen her design ideas. The design was a hummingbird, and this whole situation is now called #HummingbirdGate. It's been quite interesting to watch. As we know, all good social media crises seem to happen late on a Friday afternoon, so that nobody then has a weekend. And so what happened is things kind of escalated from there. There are a couple of things that I found really, really interesting, in that people seem to immediately take the blogger's side and just kind of thought, oh, well, screw you, Woolworths, you hate the little guy once again, and I will no longer buy anything from you. Boycott Woolworths immediately. It's a really scary kind of extreme response that people seem to have to Woolworths crises online.
Is that
And I
not
found that really interesting.
Mel, you don't think that's because people are starting to trust what other people say
Over the brand, yeah.
especially in the digital media space more than the brand, and so
But
they
I mean-
immediately assume they've got, their end of the story must be right.
For sure. I mean, I think that's got something to do with it. But at that stage, Woolies had said nothing. It was literally like 5 minutes after a blogger had posted a very long and to say, I mean, a well thought out blog post. But Woolies hadn't even had a chance to respond at that stage yet. I was just quite interested by, I think they are guilty until proven otherwise. Purely because of things that might have happened in the past, where people seem to think that Woolies will automatically just want to stick it to the small guy, which is not the case. But anyway,
I
was
think
quite
Woolies has a
interested-
reputation, though.
No, but I mean, I think, Woolies is such a huge brand, and it's a brand that is likely to have kind of a lot of situations like this going forward. And social media really amplifies that. So I do feel sorry for them in some respect, because I know how hard it is, and they can't anticipate all of the stuff that could potentially go wrong. So it just turns into this crazy manic, people just absolutely kind of freaking out. What I found really interesting, though, is that there was a couple of well-respected journalists online that were automatically just retweeting the blog post as it happened. And that kind of made me a little bit uncomfortable. And from a fact-checking point of view, I think things have changed dramatically in that regard.
I think you're absolutely right, Mel. The fact-checking and the impact of digital media on the media space itself, on ourselves, on people like us as journalists. We have to kind of check ourselves a little bit. And
absolutely,
forget
yeah.
that, again, it's just another source, it's just a different platform, but it's still the same principles that apply.
Yes, I mean, I remember when I studied journalism, the fact checking was the most important thing, and now it seems to be almost a case. And I'm generalizing Not here all because journalists not did all this, journalists did It this, seems but to be often it's a case of report now and then retract later. So that's another very interesting kind of topic as far as this is concerned.
Do you think that's because social media has become such a big kind of news carrier that is the case now?
Yeah, I think that there's definitely a first to market. So everyone wants to be first to report what's going on, which means that sometimes fact checking takes a backseat. And yeah, I think it's about people kind of getting the story. And I mean, if I was a journalist and I hadn't reported on that, I'd feel like, oh, people must think that I'm clueless. I don't know what's going on. So there's different kind of factors at play here.
Mel, let's look at it a little bit from a business perspective. You know, you're running a business, and any insights that can be gained from what's currently playing out between Woolworths and the blogger and the lady in question. Talk a little bit about how Woolworths has handled it. We got up to the point where they hadn't even made a comment yet.
Yes, yeah.
And let's gain some insights on, you know, by now they've got their social media policies in place, no doubt. They monitor, they knew once the post had gone up. But what did they do then? And what's your take on that?
So, I mean, a disclaimer here is that I've worked with Woolies in terms of social crisis comms before. But I think this time I watched it unfold, and Woolworths, I think, were quite responsible in terms of how they dealt with it. They do have a very small social media team, and they manage, I mean, between Twitter and Facebook, they've got massive platforms. What they did is they kind of assessed the threats. They saw the post as it went up. They assessed if that threat was a real threat or if it wasn't. In the background, they were fact-checking internally with the relevant departments to find out what the situation was. As soon as they got concrete kind of feedback from internally within the organization, they immediately put up a short post that said, this is the situation, this is what's happened, this is how we're responding, and this is what we're trying to do about it. And I thought that was really good because they were able to get that up very quickly. Then throughout I think it was over the next day, they carried on responding directly to people as much as possible using their social channels, just to keep a kind of personal aspect going. And then they updated their post as certain other things came to light. So it then came to light that the designs had been signed off 2 months before. The designer had approached Woolies, so that started to discredit her theory somewhat. And then they kept the public in the loop in terms of adding different facts as they got them internally. And there's a couple of reasons why they were able to do that. They were able to do that because the people managing social media at Woolies have direct access to the CEO and to the C-suite of the business.
And are
And I
they
think that's
empowered
critical.
to speak on their behalf? That's one of the key things as well. Empower the people who
Yes.
are running those channels to make the kind of responses they need to make in real time.
Absolutely. It's one of the most important things for me. So if you've got a social media team, it needs to be headed up by someone who has the weight and the authority to be able to talk directly to your C-suite so that you can make decisions quickly, and so that in turn, the management of the business takes the threats as seriously as possible.
Great. I think that covers it really. What happens now though? Like, what is the way forward for the designer and for Woolworths?
Well, I mean, I think the issue with the designer has been quite discredited because it turns out that she, in turns, stole the image from Google. I think Woolworths is trying to then figure out what next in terms of they're doing some more behind-the-scenes homework in terms of other allegations that have been made with regards to Wikipedia and that kind of thing. So what happens now is that I think 6 days later, I think we have to now start distinguishing between the people who are smart enough to get what Woolies is trying to say, and between the people who actually just feel like creating a bit of rubbish and being trolls, if you like. So we have to start differentiating between the two. And then I think it has to carry on as business as usual, because otherwise what happens is you keep the social media crisis alive by kind of tweeting about it every day, all day. So you resume business as usual, assess the threats as they come in, and then act on those and be very clear and concise and as transparent as possible going forward.
And there's no way that businesses can prevent this from happening in the future.
There are, it's interesting. Our MD that I work with, Craig Rodney, he always says that there shouldn't be anything called crisis communications, because there shouldn't be a crisis, because you should be able to anticipate as much as possible that will happen with your business. That, to a degree, is a big learning lesson. So if you put out an update, or if you have a situation that happens internally, you have to anticipate how people will respond and what platforms they'll use to respond to you. So that in itself almost negates a lot of potential crises aspects. And then you have to be able to, I mean, Woolies is different, and a lot of the big companies on social are different, because there's so much going on internally that you can't kind of think about every single potential crisis within the business. But it means that you've got to be quite proactive in terms of thinking, if I say this, what will they say? And then what will I say? And how does that impact the business?
But Mel, I think you've hit on a very important point then, and it speaks to Kriya's question, is a lot of these things are going wrong because businesses have not yet, perhaps it's starting now, but certainly, 4 or 5 years ago, those of us who were working in this space, they weren't taking it very seriously. Oh, just another platform, it's digital media, it's social media. And they weren't thinking about it as a really integrated part of their marketing, which if they did, then traditional business practices would come into play. And it's about having a strategy. You have to have a marketing strategy and you have to have a digital and social media strategy as part of that. That's your plan, isn't it?
Absolutely. You've got to have a strategic approach in terms of what are you doing, what are you doing on the platforms, what is the outcome that you want, and then more importantly, with regards to this conversation, you've got to have strategies around escalation plans, being able to triage certain comments that happen online, so being able to assess the threat as it happens and trafficking those to the right people internally. So all of those processes and procedures have to be in place, along with what are the potential FAQs, how does that impact. So the more prepared you are from the beginning, the better the outcome should be for you towards the end.
Great. Well, Mel, as usual, thank you so much for coming in and, Skyping us in and chatting to us. We really appreciate it. It is Mel Attree from Cerebra, and we're going to be seeing you next week again.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much, and get better soon, please.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mel.
The Business. Weekdays 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. on bulls.co.za. Brought to you by FNB Business Banking.